Hey, welcome, guys. Today I'm joined with a good friend of mine and colleague, Alastair Hill, who is a mindset coach and hypnotherapist. And he's somebody who has a tremendous amount of experience working with people, helping them overcome trauma, post-traumatic stress, and is also one of the most in-depth hypnotherapists and life coaches that I've met in terms of his understanding of how particular protocols work and his just curiosity in human psychology. So welcome, Alastair.
Thank you, David. Thank you. That was a very generous introduction. Thanks.
Cool, man. You can pay me the money afterwards, and
Yeah. All right. All right.
yeah, man. Well, thanks for joining us. So yeah, we had a little chat beforehand, and I thought it'd be great if maybe you could talk a little bit about how you got into this kind of work and what your personal interest is in helping people and human psychology.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So my way I go into stuff is by being really messy. By wind the clock back. Um, maybe how many years? Let's say 17 years, 16 years, um, and just kind of getting in a really bad way, getting very depressed, very anxious, very paranoid, um, and yeah, being very, very stuck, very unhappy, um, and reaching a point where I said, look, nothing's as bad as doing nothing. It's like my life had kind of got smaller and smaller and smaller and more closed in, and everything I did seemed scary and terrifying. And I just thought something has to change. I have to try doing some things. And I just started doing stuff. I started exploring, started going on courses. I started pushing myself. I'd done lots and lots of wacky stuff, even, in terms of if I heard something I thought it would help, I would often pursue it. I've got a lot of stories of trying things. Um, and eventually, stuff worked, and I figured out a load of stuff that helped me. And always been interested in psychology, always been quite philosophical, and got really passionate about helping others. And then, about 6, 7 years ago, started up my own business, helping others. And and then in the last 3 years, I've been working a lot for a charity called Rock to Recovery, working a lot with military veterans, which is, you mentioned, PTSD. You know, work with lots of people, with PTSD symptoms and anxiety issues and anger issues and all sorts of different things. And that's most of what I do these days.
Mm, okay, I like the nothing's as bad as doing nothing.
That was a turning point for me. That was a massive turning point. That was like that thought lodged in my head, and I just endlessly would get out my comfort zone. Yeah, push myself so much. Yeah, just figuring out what works really.
Mm. And did you have was there any like outward source of that, like people encouraging you, or was it like from yourself you were like, right, I need to do something about this?
Um, I had some good support. So when I was at my struggling my most, which is actually was more like about 12 years ago, 12, 13, no, maybe like 12, 13, 14 years ago. Um, it was my first couple of years at university, and I was very, very low, very depressed. I was having suicidal thoughts, and not wanting to carry on, and things like this. And my dad would speak to me on the phone, almost every single day at times. So my dad was a really good support. I'd talk to other members of my family, my mum and my brother. Um, so I had people on my side, had people who would listen to me, but there was no one who ever said, you know, come on now, pull your finger out. You have to start doing things. I guess I just had kind of friendly support, or gentle encouragement, which is kind of, I think, probably um, the best thing for me. Just people who were willing to listen. Um, but it was kind of very internal, that moment of nothing is as bad as doing nothing. I'd always get encouragement, but that was like, I don't know, that it wasn't really triggered by something somebody said. I was lucky enough to have that general support, but then I just had that moment of going, "Ugh, I have to start doing things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And was there any particular incident that led to that realization or insight?
Yeah, it was just like being at home one Saturday evening, just being terrified, like too scared to go out and visit any friends. Even like afraid of reading a book or watching TV. I was so anxious. I'd be afraid it was the wrong show. I was constantly judging and doubting and worrying and relentless thinking over and over. Um, and Yeah, it was one night just sitting there, sitting alone, on a Saturday night, knowing that my friends are out there, but I was too scared to go meet up with them. And I just thought,
Mm,
just hit me. Nothing's as bad as doing nothing. I have to start doing things.
yeah, that I think is really powerful because that like just test and experiment mindset. I know from going out with you, you like doing when we used to do hypnotherapy, not hypnotherapy, street hypnosis, and yeah, that test and experiment mindset I think is very powerful. Just not even in terms of I want to become a therapist or a coach, but just life in general, because otherwise you're just guessing for the most part.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I and I'm constantly experimenting, and I'm my first test subject,
Yeah,
trying out loads of things on myself over and over.
yeah. Mm. And how you mentioned the work at Rock to Recovery with
Mhm.
it's mainly veterans, like as in like soldiers or military
Yep,
veterans that you're working with.
that's right.
How do you find that work, and specifically like dealing with people that have suffered from trauma?
I absolutely love the work. Absolutely love it. So for me, I'm so grateful for the charity, for the opportunity I have to be doing what I do. Um, like all I want to be doing really is just exploring what I'm exploring, which is how to help people, how to help someone to move from A to B, to get out of a difficult situation and to kind of improve their lives. And um, yeah, I absolutely love it. It's been my life for the last few years. I'll sit and reflect on sessions. I mean, it's been very tough at times because I can meet people in very vulnerable and very difficult situations, and obviously, um, yeah, it can be really tough. Like hearing about what's happened and um, difficult things people have been through. But at the same time, you know, I I I I just love it. I'll reflect on it. I'll work out what I could say, what I could do, how best to help, how to set things up. In terms of how do you set up a session, how do you introduce an exercise, how do I tell a story? I love problem solving all of this, and I'm constantly doing it. It kind of hasn't stopped.
Hmm.
I'm always trying to work out how to better help somebody, um, and they're an amazing group of people to help as well. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, and doing a lot of deep inner work. It's pushed me even further to do a lot of self exploration. Because a lot of people could get burnt out doing this kind of work, but I absolutely love it. Being able to help someone in that situation, I find very rewarding. So
And what is your understanding of like how somebody develops a trauma, and then how they overcome that? Like, I know that's a big question, but have you? I
sure,
mean, through the
sure,
experience of obviously you've studied it, but now you've actually had the
yeah,
experience of working with people, and I'm sure that
yeah.
has evolved your understanding of these things.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. So, okay, so I could give some like general theoretical ideas of trauma, right? In terms of how these things happen. But it's not what I would say to a client. So
Yeah.
it's very different to what I would say in a session compared to like maybe some of the theoretical understandings of trauma or yeah. Um, so there's a few. This is my folk explanation of trauma. What my folk explanation is kind of like what I say to people to help them make sense out of it,
Yeah.
right? I don't like going into neuroscience or deep psychological theories. I like kind of just giving a simple explanation. And I so I'll give that. I'll give my simple explanation, and I'll maybe talk about some theories you may come across.
Okay.
Um, Although I'm not the biggest academic, so it'll be kind of just my sense of the area. Um, but the explanation I'd give to somebody is, look, when when I went to school, I learned a lot of information about the external world. Learned a lot of information about um, about geography, about history, about physics. And it's all pointed externally, right? And I got hardly any decent information that pointed me internally how to make sense out of the internal world. And because we don't really have good maps of how to make sense out of the internal world, like when difficult events happen, right? When there are, when tragedy happens, when there are things happen which are, very unpleasant, right? We often don't know how to make sense out of the thoughts and feelings afterwards. And a lot of the trouble that people have are the thoughts and feelings afterwards that keep coming back up, right?
Mm.
And so my job is to help someone to make sense out of the thoughts and feelings that happen afterwards, so that in some sense they can move beyond them and get on with the things in life they'd like to be doing. Um, so that is almost how I'd explain trauma to somebody. Um, in terms of like there's a skill of being able to make sense out of your experience. Because the truth is, if you look at some of the research, again, I've not read these papers. I've only kind of sort of secondhand, this, but I believe this is quite well established. A year after a traumatic event, and you can classify a traumatic event, as being like a car accident, an assault, whatever it might be, right? Different categories of trauma. A year after a traumatic event, something like uh, 80 to 75% of people don't have any PTSD symptoms. It's about 15 to 20% of people have PTSD symptoms a year afterwards, right? So not everybody develops PTSD after a traumatic event. So, one inference you could make from that is, trauma or traumatic event doesn't necessarily lead to PTSD, right? Because I'm guessing some people have a way of making sense out of or processing the events, which helps them to sort of process it, to put it to one side, to sort of be at peace with it, to kind of move beyond it. And other people don't have a way of making sense out of it in that kind of a way, and so it continues to disturb them across time.
Mm.
So that's maybe some theoretical justification for that explanation that I'd give a client. Although I rarely share what I just shared with a client. Um, but in terms of like other explanations of trauma, there's a guy called Peter Levine who he, people who are really into him may say I'm saying his ideas wrong, but my sense of what he's saying is essentially that trauma happens when things happen too fast for somebody to kind of process in their senses, right? Like a car accident, it's like something just really quick happens and you can't actually stay with it, and it's like the body has these half finished actions, and it's almost trying to replay these actions over and over again. I've had clients that they wake up in the middle of the night halfway through an action. And this will kind of happen over and over again. There's almost a half finished movement going on. Anything that someone can't be present with is another definition of trauma. If you have to dissociate, if it's too horrific for you to be with it, that is another definition of how trauma occurs. So yeah, there's a few kind of general ideas about trauma too, but I rarely give those explanations.
Mm. I like. Well, I've heard some of the theory about what you're talking about, the half finished action,
Mhm.
and also the sense making. And so, what is the difference between those that get on with or don't seem afflicted with uh, the symptoms of PTSD after something that bad has happened, and like what's the difference between how they're making sense of what an event compared to someone um, who is suffering from symptoms? Is there, like, have you broadly found, oh, okay, yeah, that seems to be people that are getting better on their own or through your own help compared to
Sure,
those that just can be, yeah, trapped in that kind of PTSD?
sure. Yeah, I hear you. So, on the one hand, okay, I can't properly answer your question because I don't meet the people who
Yeah,
get over it
you're
after a year,
self-selected.
right? So,
Why don't
so,
you
so,
want to?
so I haven't interviewed them as to how all their thought processes went.
Mm,
Um, you know, so I mostly meet the people who don't,
mm,
get, however, I can share patterns of you know people that seem to find it harder to get over
mm,
those kinds of events than others. um, Again, I'm quite cautious describing this on here on this interview, because if I was working with somebody, I wouldn't say these things to them
mm,
unless they asked. I'd say them to them if they asked, but I don't. I don't. One thing about helping someone with something is, I always want to create a sense of hope in somebody,
mm.
and having a sense of hope and direction is really important, and just to be on the learning curve is really important. And so, I'm more interested in fostering that in somebody than I am in saying to them why it might be more difficult for them than someone else to get over their
Yeah,
to get over their issue. If I see there are facts in their life that might make it more difficult, I may sort of I'll maybe try and navigate that with them, but I won't, I don't want to present it in a way where they will go, oh, I have these factors going on, therefore it's going to be even harder for me. Oh no, I'm more stuck than I realized.
yeah. So I
Right.
guess
So
to
go on.
just to, like, I don't obviously want you to do anything. You're not to reveal something you're not
No, I know,
comfortable.
I'll happily
But
share. I just want to pre-frame it by
yeah,
saying
yeah.
this. Yeah.
So because the reason I asked the question is because I thought if we could, through understanding that like it would help, well, anyone potentially watching to go, oh yeah, maybe I'm doing that, and so how can I be doing
Oh,
that instead, if you know what I mean?
fine. So, okay, so in general, the things that make it harder for people, in my experience, to overcome traumatic event are: do they have good social support? Yes or no?
Mm,
Right? If they have really good social support, they're more likely to get over it, right? Um, you a partner, kids, things like this, people that are there around them that love them, and and give them a role, give them a place, give them some, like, a group to be a part of. Really important. Um, People who have other traumas, unfortunately, like, some people have a whole series of bad events happen, right? And undoubtedly, the people that find it hardest to get over, let's say I'm working with someone who has some kind of combat trauma that happened. You know, if when they were growing up, unfortunately, they grew up in a household where they were beaten, they were treated really disrespectfully. And they kind of learned to feel a lot of shame, let's say, growing up, or this kind of thing. Then often they will struggle a lot more to deal with the combat trauma, because they sort of already brought to it a way of making sense out of themselves in the situation, where they're already kind of blaming themselves more than maybe someone else might,
mm,
um, or taking over responsibility for what happened, when, compared to what somebody else might. So, you know, um, but but I would never say to somebody, oh well, because you've got all these things, therefore it's extra difficult. And
mm,
I try, I may tactfully talk about this in some way, but I'd rarely say it so bluntly.
mm.
um, um, because again, I want to foster a sense of growth and a journey, and this kind of thing in somebody. So um, so those are two factors: social support and pre-existing traumas and issues. I think they're the biggest two in my experience.
Mm. Okay. And what, in comparison to someone that is uh, more, I guess, more able or has more resources to get over it quicker? What?
Yeah, because if I was just thinking more, yeah, that's a good question as well. This is just generalizations, right? There are some
Mhm.
people who find it really difficult, even though they have great social support and a great
Mm.
upbringing and things like this. But um, there's definitely like some psychological skills that make it easier.
Yeah.
Um, you, you know, um, um, having a willingness to learn. So people who definitely seem to improve the most are willing to learn. They're willing to get on a learning curve. They don't just want the bad feeling to go, they get interested in change. They're interested in, how does the feeling work? How does my mind work? Right. Um, another thing which can really help a person, which again doesn't depend upon your upbringing or your social support, right? It's just a mindset people can bring in, um, is all or nothing thinking, right? The more someone has all or nothing thinking, the slower progress is going to be.
Mm.
The more someone is willing to see it as a learning curve and, oh, it's just a tiny bit better here, or that's an improvement there, or the more someone has that kind of perspective, that's really helpful. Some people have more internal skills in terms of being able to be aware of a mental image or a body sensation or a bit of self-talk, or some people have more internal skills in tracking these things and particularly being aware of sensations in the body. Um, some people have a better ability to focus on one thing. Like some people, you can say, just notice that, and they can focus in on it. And some
Mm.
people can't actually focus. They can't keep their mind still for very long, and their mind will be flowing a lot into other things. That makes it trickier to help somebody if they're, or easier if they can focus. So there's a few other factors that make a difference or make it easier.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. The what stood out for me from that is the all or nothing thinking, or the the scanning, almost like deliberately, or not deliberately, but scanning for a problem rather than
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging the improvement. And I'm saying that because I've done that before. I remember when I had
Mm-hmm.
depression. That was pretty much, I was always looking for the,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, it's got better, but this and this is still wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
in I think it's just a survival reflex,
Mm-hmm.
really. Like that might be
Mm-hmm.
great if you're
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
trying to gather resources in the wilderness, but in modern sense of like trying to get better from something, it's uh, holds a lot of people back. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how do you work with someone like that? And because I don't know, I would be interested in your experience, but I've often found people get sometimes a little bit defensive in, if you're pointing or like explaining this, or maybe show more, let's focus on the good stuff and let's focus on the process rather than like it's somehow some valuable thing that they're giving up. And that I found that sometimes that can be um, an issue that people get a bit defensive around. I don't know what your experience is like.
Yeah, so I guess the way I avoid um, people getting defensive is by making it very impersonal.
Mm.
Um, because I think it is a trait that I have done.
Mm.
You shared that you did this too,
Yeah, I did
and
it. Yeah.
we still can, right? We still can
Yeah,
at
I'm not
times, right?
still, I can't pretend I
Yeah,
didn't
right.
do it. Yeah.
Right. So, and I think it's something that almost everybody can do. So,
Mm.
I think sometimes making it impersonal. I say sometimes that's kind of what I do. It's this impersonal thing that we can do, and and then I guess just with encouragement and different stories, trying to help someone to see it. So I'd share a couple of stories I might tell or things I might do. I give you a few. I mean, I might say to somebody, look, if anyone that's been stuck for a long time, you know, they really don't like feeling the way they're feeling, right? And I know because I was stuck for a long time too. And it's like, yeah, in order to get to the point where you actually go and see somebody, it has to get really urgent. It has to get really bad, right? Most of us suffer in silence for a long time. In order to reach out, it has to got to a point where it's like, I can't
Yeah.
tolerate this anymore. It has to change, right? And and it's so natural to have that relationship to your experience where it's like, I just don't want to feel this anymore. Like it has to go, it has to be gone. Like I just can't stand it anymore. And I said, and I'll say, yeah, and that's totally understandable. And the problem that creates is that it can keep someone more stuck because if you start to feel it, it can be easier to go, oh, it's still here. I just wanted it to completely go, right? And actually, what we're going to try and do is almost to form a softer relationship to it, where you get kind of less bothered or less concerned, or it's easier to kind of navigate it or to ride through it. It's more like skill building, so you can kind of deal with it better. Is that okay if we view this as like a skill building or like a journey rather than like an on or off type thing? Right. So, and I'll try and get someone's agreement. Yeah, okay, it's okay to view it that way, right? And another sort of thing I might do is uh, I might get someone to look up. I got this from friend and mentor Jürgen Rasmussen. I might get someone to look up young woman, old woman illusion. And it's great doing loads of work on Zoom because people can go Google it, right? And I get people to look at this image. Maybe people after this interview, or they can pause it and look up go find the illusion, right? It's basically this picture, you've seen it, where either looks like there's a young woman or an old woman, right? And I'll say to people, what do you see? Do you see a young woman or an old woman? And they'll say, oh, I can see a young woman. And I'll say, okay, can you see the old woman? And sometimes they'll say no, right? And I'll try and guide them to see the old woman, right? And then they'll see the old woman. And I'll go, right, really see the old woman now and think about like what she's thinking about. Like what's on the old woman's mind, right? And how you kind of feel when you see the old woman. And I'll say, as you're doing that, can you see the young woman? And they'll often say, no, because you can't see both at once. And they'll go back to the young woman. I'll say, think about what the young woman is thinking and like what's going on for the young woman, how you feel when the young woman's there. And as you're doing that, can you see the old woman? And they'll go, no, I can't see the old woman. And I'll go, right, this is a great example of how your thoughts work. You can't have two thoughts at once, right? You can't have two thoughts at once. You can only have one at a time. And the problem is that if you're focusing on the negative and what's the same, you can't see what's different. It's not that there's nothing that's different. It's like there is a young woman that you could see, but if you're only focusing on the old woman, you can't see the young woman. Right? So this is just a fact about how our minds work that we have to navigate together. Right? And so on some level, you kind of have to make a decision to orient towards the change, to orient towards viewing positivity, to orient towards viewing difference. Like at some level, you have to decide that. And then I'll maybe move on to another story or get their reflections on that. So it's another example of how I might set up try and coach someone to view difference.
I like that. Yeah, that's very good. I mean, for me personally, and from people that I've worked with, I've often found that it's the reason that they are focused towards the negative is that there's a fear that they're not safe if they're ignoring a danger if they're looking at the positive, that they're ignoring a real problem that would potentially be a threat. But I know from that you create a very safe environment, and I think just that relationship with somebody as well is helping people just to feel calm and relaxed, and that they're in good hands. That
mm.
is yeah, therapeutic, because people feel like they're it's okay to, let their hand off the the, the tight grip of fear, that nothing awful is going to happen if they look that way.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. One of my biggest learnings doing what I'm doing, and there's a particular client actually who I learned this from, um, is that so much of this work is about trust.
Mm,
So much of it's about trust. That the client has to trust me that I'm going to safely guide them.
mm,
Um, and yeah, and I think as a coach, as a guide, as a therapist, as a facilitator, you really need to honor that there's a huge level of trust that goes on if you're going to help someone with a really personal, difficult issue. Um, and yeah, the last few years I've done a lot of work, with myself to um, I guess to be able to show up in a way where I'm honoring that, and I'm really, you know, present to that, right? That's kind of how it works. It's y- you know, so yeah, I think trust is a massive part of helping someone with some of these things.
yeah,
Um,
it is. Yeah, I agree with that. Like creating this, well, and I think safe space is maybe the word I think sometimes misused, but like it is a safe space for the person.
mm,
They're going to be okay. Whatever they show up and say is fine. Um,
mm,
and yeah, like the trust that they're not in danger. Like, because of course they're not like physically in danger when they come to see you, but if somebody's suffering from yeah, trauma or stress or
hmm
any kind of event that is, yeah, traumatizing them, it can feel very scary to make any kind of change, because maybe it could get worse if they do this, or maybe it could be,
mm,
uh, that's I think why a lot of people don't do anything, is because they're like, well, they're scared. If I do something, it could potentially get worse if I do that. Like because there's a rationalization often around the people's problems. They're not doing it deliberately to screw themselves up. They're like, the reason they're focusing on this thing is, um, often in some sense, that they think it's keeping them safe, because that, in a physical situation maybe it would, but when it's just happening in your mind, it's not really. It doesn't serve the same function.
yeah, I think people have a reason to be cautious.
Yeah.
If they have an issue, it's uh, yeah, I think it's a really, really big topic. It's a lot of people do get hurt seeing a therapist or seeing a coach. I mean that's why you want to have a conversation with the person before you start working. That's why you hopefully get a referral from people who have had good experiences with them, and this kind of stuff, right? And that's why a lot of people, if they're going to work with a coach over a long period of time, they might have several conversations with them before they hire them. Or if you're going to a lot of people like watching YouTube videos of people speak before they go work with them, and like reading their blogs. They like, because someone who, um, it is possible to make someone, you know, worse. I don't know if "make" is the right word, but it is possible for someone to come out the other end of a session feeling worse, and to feel unresourceful, right? And I on my journey doing what I'm doing, I've definitely had sessions where I said the wrong thing.
Mm,
I really wanted to help and I really wanted to do something well, and it's tough. It's tough for them and it's tough for you as this person trying to help, because
mm,
it's like, oh shit, like I messed up. I seriously messed
yeah.
up, and hopefully, you've got enough trust for the person that you can work out what you did wrong, and you can actually use it, in a positive way. Um, but I've worked with a lot of people now who have been to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and this unfortunately this happens a lot with trauma, and they will just get them to talk about the trauma, right? With military guys, get them to talk about, this event and that event and this event, and they just come out feeling terrible, right? And they just get worse. Like, it does not help at all. Like, it's not practical. Uh, so people have good reason to be cautious, and when I start work with someone, I can often, sometimes I just make a guess. I might say, hey, look, I might say to someone, hey, look, I'm not going to get you to describe what happened in detail. Like, I'm not this isn't that kind of work that I do with people. I said, if you want to talk about things, I'll happily listen and we can talk about how I help, but I'm not going to go digging around, uninvited and just with this preoccupation with getting you to describe the most difficult things that have happened to you, right? It's not necessary to have to do those kinds of things to get a really great result with somebody, you know. So people have reasons to be cautious. That's my view.
Yeah, and it's also like you said, it's not, 'cause, it's often trained professionals that have been.
Well-meaning, well-meaning, but
Yeah, well-meaning. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't think there's anyone. I think, and yeah, I'm sure that for some people that could be beneficial, and for others
mhm.
potentially, like for others, others not.
Right, and I just see the people who it's not. So that
Yeah,
you're right. I see the bias sample, right? I see the people who don't get helped by those things. So,
yeah,
um,
but I do know that. Well, it can sometimes feel like just picking at a scab if there doesn't seem to be, like, you're not helping the person be more resourceful within what you're describing, or you're,
yeah,
yeah, just seemingly going around in circles over the negative
yeah,
thing that
100%.
happened. But yeah, at the same time, I'm sure it can help some people potentially in overcoming traumas and such.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
For you, what is there any specific like, what's the most, I guess, the biggest transformation you've seen? Like, obviously you don't have to tell someone's name, but I'm just interested in like specific an event that happened that maybe you were like, wow, holy shit, and then the transformation that somebody went through.
So, yeah, there have been a few I could talk about. So, firstly, I don't. I less and less I see my work as about having to create massive transformations.
Yeah.
But I can share about a few. Um, uh, like what I'm looking for very often is, look, there will be a repeated situation in someone's life
Hmm.
where they have a panic, or they get a feeling they don't like, or they get angry, or whatever it might be. And, you know, it's very regular for me that, a short space of time, short number of sessions, that specific situation is now different, right? They're now calm, or they're more resourceful, or they've got a tool, or they're on the learning curve, right? And I'm really happy with that. Um, and for some people, it's like a learning process. For some people, it's like a big epiphany, and suddenly it's all fallen away, right? I don't mind uh, what kind of form it takes. I'm just interested in, helping the person out. But yeah, I've had some clients who, um, uh, think about a guy, it's happened quite recently. I've been working with for quite a while. We worked through a lot of issues. We worked through some like anger issues. We worked through some issues to do with memory, social anxiety, hypervigilance. We're going through a load of different things, all improving gradually, bit by bit, improving.
Mm.
He's now less angry with his kids. He's now can go to the supermarket and he's relaxed. Now this memory bothers him less, bit by bit. But just at some point, just this massive shift occurred, and it was like loads of it just fell away. It was almost like, um, and I had a conversation with him about it. I said what made the difference, and he said, I just completely accepted the feeling of anxiety. He was like, he had the feeling of anxiety would come up, and it'd been reduced a lot through all the work that we'd done, but he just kept getting anxious about a certain thing, and he just totally accepted that it was there. It just was a complete, just allowed it, just opened up, just completely allowed, peacefully allowed it, and it just passed in 30 seconds or a minute, like zero resistance to it. And then he just realized that he could do that, and he just started doing it all the time. And then I spoke to him at some point, and he goes, yeah, I put on, I watched a few war movies the other day just to test myself, right? And he goes, and I thought about all the memories. He goes, and I just realized there's nothing in my mind that can hurt me. Like that image cannot hurt me, that sensation cannot hurt me, those thoughts can't hurt me, right? And it's almost like the whole threat response inside of him just switched off around, around a whole load of things. And yeah, and you talk to him now, and he's like really peaceful. He's really calm. It's a real transformation. I'm really happy for him. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens. But I'm happy just with like the more simple. You know what? I can. I took my daughter shopping, Christmas shopping, something I never would have done. It's not like the whole life has transformed. It's just like oh, there's just this whole chunk of stress that's gone. And normally this person would stay at home and not go out in busy streets, but he just out of the blue he said, put your jacket on, we're going Christmas shopping. And now like the daughter is happy because she's got dad back a bit more. So yeah, I'm happy with all that kind of the simple stuff too. Doesn't have to be the enlightenment experience that someone goes through, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that you mean, as you mentioned before, you'd worked with that guy over a period, so it wasn't like
Yeah.
the first time you spoke to him, he realized just accept my feelings and
Right. I mean, I've
so,
had some stuff where you make a massive impact, so in a session or two, but my experience is usually in a specific area rather than being like this massive general, well, I'm seeing the whole nature of my mind differently.
yeah.
So yeah, I've had done sessions with people where the first session they were like that massively turned things around for me, and it was a huge thing. But those like huge transformations for me anyway tend to come more over a longer period of time, where it's more like a change in their personality in some way, in that they'll develop this sense of peacefulness or this sense of positivity, or that's very kind of grounded and deep. That can happen, but it depends upon the person. It's like what they're looking for, and what they want, and how much. So whatever, I'm all good. Just go with the flow.
Yeah. I think that the way you said that guy shared that the thoughts and feelings can't actually hurt him. That's really powerful, because it's the threat response really. Like if you think, well, most people are not even thinking, oh, this can hurt me. They're just feeling this can hurt me.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, one sec. Yeah, I'm just on the call. Yeah, please. Thanks. Dinner's almost ready. Well, I even
Right.
yeah, the feeling comfortable with a thought or with a feeling. Like I don't think it's not normally conscious when someone's getting that, but to have that change, or to be able to be okay with be comfortable
Mhm.
being uncomfortable
Mm, mm, mm.
is
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
is
Uh-huh.
really huge.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm, cool. Well, I think it'd be a good time to wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah. Dinner's ready.
Get my dinner. What? Yeah, I got the pot is boiling, so I've been simmering it, making some Italian vegetable soup.
All right. Delicious. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts, Alistair. It's great catching up and then picking picking your brains and hearing your experiences on working with people.
Yeah. Very welcome. It's great to share. I hope this is interesting for some
Yeah,
people.
and if people are interested in connecting with you or finding out more, where would be the best place for them to reach you?
My website is Alastair dash hyphen, those little dashes in the middle,
Yeah,
Alastair-hill.com.
cool. And it's
Um,
Alistair with a it's a
Alastair is spelled Alastair.
great.
Yeah,
All right, I'll
yeah,
put a link in the video below as well.
yeah. Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was great talking. All right, cheers. See you then, Alistair.
Yeah, all the best, mate. Bye bye.